Everyone, we'll get started in just a second, just getting everyone out of the wait room, and then we're going to turn the waiting room off and go from there. Okay. Katie, can you do me a favor and keep admitting people? Because I think we're stuck in that loop where it won't turn the waiting room off while there's someone in there, and every time they all get in, two more show up.
I think Zoom may have just removed that option entirely. They're
They
keeping us
might
on our
have.
toes. Yes.
There's that too. Okay. Well, if you could do me a favor and then sort of admit people, check over on that occasionally, that would be awesome.
Absolutely, I got you.
All right, thank you. All right, hello everyone. Welcome to the 2023 EAR webinar. I am Chris Bria, and we have a wonderful panel of guest hosts today from CalRecycle. RT Lau, Peter Stackless, Michelle Graham, and Katie Cope will be helping us with some of the technical issues. Once again, this webinar is being recorded. The closed captioning is enabled. We will be making the video accessible and posting it to our website afterwards. If you have a question to ask, please put it into the Q&A box on Zoom. If your Q&A box is missing, look under the little set, or a Q&A button is missing. Look under the little button that says more. It might be hiding in there. Feel free to use the chat to discuss whatever, introduce yourselves, share links, anything of that nature. And admit all. Once again, we are going to be going through the 2023 year, along with a couple technical issues related to logging in. If you have questions, please put them in the Q&A chat when we get to questions. Probably after certain sections, like I'll do a little bit on login and WebPass and contact issues, and then we will be switching to Peter to discuss RDRS functionality, and then we will do some questions from him so he can move along and go back to the land of RDRS, and then we will get into the EAR proper. So this is the CalRecycle webpage for Logic. I will put this link in the chat, so any of you who need it can go straight to it. This page has some basic info on accessing the Local Government Information Center Logic. That is where the EAR report is housed. If you have access, hopefully you know. If you don't have access and you're not a contact, you can fill out the contact change request form, and depending on what you pick, we will update the contact information. Once you are added to the system, you should get an invite for obtaining a web pass. If you already had a web pass, you should get a message saying you've been invited to use Logic with your existing web pass. Your web pass is attached to your email address. If you are unable to get in with your web pass from this web pass page, there are a few options to get a new password if you forgot it, to change it, or to resend the activation. And I say you should get an email about web passes, but if you try to sign up for a web pass and you don't follow through on the secondary activation email, you're sort of in this weird limbo zone where you don't really have a web pass, but you can't create a new one. And if you're not getting the activation email or the emails that say, you've been invited to create a web pass or you've been invited to use Logic with your existing web pass, you either need to change your own settings or have your IT group help you change those settings to allow messages from the @calrecycle.ca.gov domain. We do have a number of people who still have some spam blockers set up, and they do get caught up in that a little bit. And the tough thing is we don't know what you're not getting. So when you try to sign up for a web pass, there's always a second step. It will send you an activation email and you click on that link, and then your web pass will be activated.
Hey, Chris.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's just for me, but I'm not seeing your screen shared. I don't know if anyone else is seeing that too.
Sorry. No, it's that secondary share button. My bad. Where to go? There it is. So I'll say that again. This is the My Logic page. This is the one that I dropped into the chat. As I mentioned, if you need to become a contact, make this a little smaller because controls are getting in the way. You can fill out the contact change request form. We will get you added as a contact, assuming everything makes sense. Afterwards, you will get you've been invited to use your web pass in Logic, or you've been invited to use your existing web pass. Sorry, I have to keep changing my screen. The Zoom buttons keep moving down in front of me and getting in the way. Once we add you as a contact, you should have access to the system. If you don't get an invite message or you are having trouble activating your web pass from the web pass page, you get a new password, change your password, or resend the activation email. If you're not getting the activation email, talk to your IT group and allow from calrecycle.ca.gov. Okay, now that we've got that out of the way, again, from the My Logic page, you can get into Logic from here. There's also a link to the help guides, and there's another link to a basic page of information from the annual report. This was actually just updated a couple weeks ago, and it was a little out of line for a couple years, and we finally have gotten through some of our larger website updates. You'll notice a lot of pages are starting to have a new look and feel, different headers, pictures, and we're slowly kind of going through the whole website and updating all that. And we're finally getting to some of the LG Central pages. Katie, are there any questions related to web passes or sign in while we're on the subject?
We haven't received any questions so far.
Awesome. So with that, I will go into the year. I'm already logged in. So once you have a web pass, you go into the year. Should be able to log in from this site. If you still have issues with the web pass, there's a button there. And hopefully once you're in, you will see a screen that shows affiliations. While we're doing this webinar, we're just in a test account. That's what this yellow stripe across the top. So no data we're going to enter, manipulate, will change. And when you are on this screen, you will only see the jurisdictions or counties you currently have access to. We have access to more for various testing and display purposes. And so most folks will only see one jurisdiction, maybe a county. Others, like consultants or haulers, might have access to various. There's also two settings. Some people only have view access, and some people have ear editing access. Usually to expand the editing access, we will ask existing users or existing contacts to verify if a consultant or a hauler needs viewing or editing access. So at this time, no, that's not it. I would like to I am going to stop sharing my screen, and I would like to pass it off to Peter Stackless, who is going to give us some basic info on the recycling and disposal reporting system, which has some data that feeds into the ear itself to do the annual per capita rate calculations. Peter, take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Again, I'm Peter Stackless. I'm kind of the project lead that oversees the recycling and disposal reporting system, RDRS database, that we always commonly refer to it as. That's how it's spelled out. So kind of just want to give you guys an idea of what type of data we have on our public CalRecycle website in terms of showing jurisdiction data, and then also kind of quarterly reports and facilities who had to report it. So let me share my screen. Okay, let me try the button again. Okay, there we go. Okay, you guys see that's the CalRecycle website. Everyone seeing that okay?
Yep, we got you.
Awesome. Yeah, so the RDS data is basically feeds the ear data for the 2003, the total disposal, green material, ADC, and transformation, and some other data that gets moved into the ear calculator, and that has the jurisdictions, disposal, and other data in that calculation. So that data was moved over last week on June 13th. So the thing about the public reports are basically that on there, the data can change past that date because landfills, transformation facilities, transfer processors, they can change their data at any time. So the public reports get fed with that data. And then so basically the idea is that the data on the public reports may be a little bit different than what you see in the ear calculation, because that is static and that is basically frozen for what it was when it was June 13th. So the best way to find the RDRS webpage, and I have to get past these pop-ups too, is to hit the search button and just search for RDRS. And that'll bring up the first result, should be the RDRS webpage, which has all kinds of different things about reporting for RDRS. But if you want to get to the public reports, you just scroll down to reports, hit public reports for disposal and recycling data. So here we have a bunch of different reports, not just jurisdiction related, but also for other info in RDRS, but I'll just be focusing on the jurisdiction data. So one of the key things to remember is the data is reported quarterly, and for disposal and that similar data, it's landfills and transfer processors, which are usually transfer stations or material recovery facilities or similar disposal type facilities that report the numbers. So since they report quarterly, we have a report that down here, number 10, quarterly report search, that lets you see all the registered facilities in RDRS, not just those ones I mentioned, but the other ones that they report to, and you can see the status of their report. So say if you were interested in looking at a landfill and whether they submitted for 2023 Q4, you could do that easily here. You'd enter the reporting period, and the deadline for reporting for that was like back in April of this year. So theoretically, they should all be submitted, but sometimes they don't. So the next thing you'd want to change to look at would be you're interested in a landfill. So for under entity activity type, you could pick a landfill. And then, again, I have to move around the screens here. Yeah, then you'd want to look at the status. And so if you were interested in not submitted, this would basically show you anyone who has not submitted, either they didn't start the report at all or it started, but they didn't submit it. So then if you search, then you can see there's 2 landfills, Benton Crossing, Visalia, that haven't submitted their quarterly report for 2004 Q3. So it's like that. You can also view the submitted ones and get a whole idea of who's submitted for what quarter. And basically, as the quarters go on and they're completed, then they'll appear in this report. So it's a kind of a useful tool to kind of get an idea if you're looking for a certain facility and whether they submitted or not. So back to the reports. To kind of go over the different jurisdiction reports we have, they kind of break it out down in different levels. And I'll just give one example of Sacramento as I go through and show you what you could see if you were looking for the jurisdiction Sacramento. So the first report I'll show you is the overall jurisdiction tons for disposal and disposal related uses. So what this report shows is kind of similar to what you would see in the year calculation. If you're interested in the yearly sum, which is all 4 quarters for 23 combined, you can view that by picking yearly sum. You can also view it at the quarterly level, but I'll focus on yearly since this is kind of what the year is about. So then if you wanted to pick 23, just pick that in the year. And then if to filter, you can look at the whole state, but since I'm only interested in Sacramento, you can pick the jurisdiction radio button, start typing in Sacramento, and it should appear on the list, and then you can do a search. And then for material, you can break it down by landfill, transformation, EMSW, the different types of facilities that receive disposal, but usually it's just easier to do all because that would represent all disposal that your jurisdiction had for that year. So then for the output, what you see here, it's kind of broken down in different ways. The overall tons would be this 4th column to the left. The landfill includes host assigned tons due to missing reports. Well, no, actually, so that's your landfill tons, pardon. And then you have the transformation tons. So that's the amount of tons that went to transformation facilities. I think there's 2 in the state. And then any tons that go to EMSW facilities. So it'd be these 3 main columns right here that you'd be focused on to look at the total tons. And I just want to give an idea. So you have this verbiage saying host assigned due to missing reports. So what does that mean? In the system, that basically means, say you're a landfill and you received stuff from a Sacramento transfer station. And so you reported that you received disposal. And basically that transfer station didn't submit a report. So the system will say, okay, I can't go back and look at, which jurisdictions are assigned to that amount of disposal. So instead, the tons are host assigned to that transfer processor in Sacramento. So in that case, that's what host assigned means, is those tons were host assigned because there was a missing report in most cases. So that's kind of what that means. There's more nuance to it, but I don't have the time to go into it, but so we have several columns here that kind of go into that detail for each type. For landfill, for transformation, EMSW, it'll show you the tons that are host assigned. So you can see for Sacramento, they had over 1,800 tons that were host assigned. And then you also can see the green material ADC tons, since those also count as disposal for the electronic for the year. And then up here on the far right, you can see the exported green material for potential beneficial reuse that went out of state, and then the tons that were host assigned. So in general, these kind of columns show up in most of the reports, and that's kind of why I'm going over them now. So then to show you the next report, which will kind of shows you more detail instead of the overall tonnage level. This number 2, jurisdiction disposal and beneficial reuse by destination. Wait a second as it tries to load it. I guess internet's slow. But what this is going to show you is the breakdown by facility. So again, you can look at it by quarterly or by yearly sum. So I'll pick yearly, 23 again, since we're focusing on that. And then Sacramento, same way, start typing it. You can pick it. And for material types, the same 3 types. You just pick all to see everything. You can break it down by a certain facility if you know that facility received tons from your jurisdiction, but it's probably easier just to leave it as all, so you can see everything. And then if you do a search, and then when it's thinking, you'll see this little button appear, this little, whatever you call it. But once that goes away, then that means it's ready and the output should show. So what you're seeing here is for Sacramento, the destination facility, which is Altamont landfill, got the 54 tons of landfill tons from them. And then, sorry, the scroll bars at the bottom, but you can see all that has the same similar columns as that other report had. So it's just broken down by facility. So that way you can see all the facilities that sent, and that's for the whole year. In some cases, you may be interested in just a specific quarter. And so you could pick like fourth quarter for Sacramento. And I think it's still thinking. But then it would break it down by quarter so you can get an idea if you're just focusing in on a specific quarter. Okay, and back to reports. The next report for jurisdiction data is this jurisdiction disposal exported out of state by destination. And this basically is a summary of any kind of exported disposal or green material tons that your jurisdiction had. So again, it has the same quarterly and yearly sum breakdowns. So we'll do it by yearly sum. 23, and you can again pick Sacramento. And the material types, again, you can break it down. Here's, well, actually it's different than a landfill because it's out of state. You can do it by just focus on solid waste or green material potential beneficial reuse. So I'll pick solid waste. You'd probably be more interested in the disposal. And it's thinking. Okay, so what this would show is that Sacramento sent tons to Lockwood out of state, which is Nevada, and there is a total of 23,000 tons. And it also has the host assigned due to missing reports. So if there's any of those tons, it would show that here in this final column. So it just gives you an idea if your jurisdiction exports tons for disposal or green material, you can use this report to get a good summary. And then finally, the final jurisdiction report that we have is report 6, total jurisdiction disposal or disposal related materials sent through transfer processors versus directly to a landfill. So this is the most complex report we have for jurisdiction data, and I could spend a lot of time going over it, which we don't have, but to give you an overall idea, if you want to get an idea of whether your tons came directly to the landfill via like generators or self-haul, bringing it to a landfill, or if it came through a transfer processor, this report will give you a good idea. So again, you can break it down by quarterly or yearly. I'll pick yearly, 23, and then pick Sacramento again. So the originating type is kind of the key way to see what this report shows, like whether it's directly sent to a landfill in California or whether it came through a transfer processor. And then it also shows similar for if it's exported by a transfer processor out of state or by a contract hauler sending it out of state or sent to an exporting transfer processor via another transfer processor. So it's going to break down the tonnages once I run it by all these 5 different types. And then again, for material streams, you have solid waste or green material ADC or export. I'll pick solid waste since we're mainly interested in that. You can kind of filter it down more in these destination entity activity types or organization fields, but it's better just to get an overall summary initially until you learn this report better. So if you see, so what it's showing here is for Sacramento, they sent to California disposal via transfer processor. And so the originating organization is Davis Street. So that's the transfer processor that received those disposal tons. And then, sorry, I got to go to the bottom to get to the scroll bar. And then the destination or landfill was Altamont landfill. And then it'll show you it was landfill. They were at a landfill entity and they got a total of 54 tons of disposal or solid waste. And yeah, that's it. So it'll give you a good idea, like if you're focusing on a certain facility, maybe they didn't get your allocations right for your jurisdiction, you can kind of use this report and see which tons were sent through transfer processors. Or if you wanted to see direct tons, you could see that too. So the final thing I kind of wanted to show you was the complaints section. So going back to the main RDRS homepage. Well, actually got me back further, but let me go back to RDRS again. So RDRS has in the regulations, there's the ability to submit complaints about RDRS public reporting, which would be like the entities like landfills, transfer processors that report in there. So you can submit a report of non-compliance related to those entities in RDRS and how they report. So that's what this button here, report RDRS non-compliance, is about. So there's a lot of language here that this is not for like your local hauler or garbage collection is not a complaint line for that. There is a complaint section on the California environmental Cal EPA environmental complaint system where you can file those types of complaints, but this just deals with RDRS and complaints specifically, like say a jurisdiction isn't reporting correctly in terms of the tons, or they're not submitting in time, you can file a complaint. So what we have here is it'll list all the reporting entities in RDRS, and you can filter it down by certain ones. I didn't want to pick a certain one, but basically you can filter it using these search filters up here, and then search and filter the list. But if you see your entity on this list and you want to file a complaint about it, you can hit the file complaint button. And then that'll bring up the information about that entity in RDRS, like their site name, the entity name, and their address info and some other info. And then you can go about filing your complaint. I mean, a lot of this is self-explanatory, but you should probably post your information, because in terms of the complaint process, CalRecycle staff will have to like contact the complainee and then get more information about the complaint to follow up on it. You can remain anonymous. That option is here. So if you click that, then you don't have to enter that information. And then down here, we have a section on allegations. I'm not going to go into that because we don't have time, but you'd want to kind of really lay out what the issue is and what you're complaining about, and follow these kind of guidelines for us to be able to follow up on that complaint. And then when you've completed everything, you hit the I'm not a robot, and it just has like some confirmation stuff to make sure this is not an Autobot, and then you could submit your complaint. And CalRecycle would get back to you, I believe, in a certain time frame. I might say on here, but probably within a week or two. And that was pretty much it. Hopefully it was not more than 10 minutes. So I'm open for questions.
No,
Hi, Peter.
Great job. Thank you. Also, a reminder, everyone, please don't contact Peter directly about stuff. I'll send the questions in the future to the rdsat.calrecycle.ca.gov mailbox. Peter is a special guest today. He actually hasn't, I think it's been a while since you did one of these webinars with us, but he's filling in because some other people are out. And his day-to-day focus is not on the specifics that they used to be, but he's been working on this disposal data with us for a long time. So thank you a lot for the presentation. Katie, are there any questions?
We do have a couple of questions. Our first question is from Kim Brown. Kim, you should be able to unmute yourself. Please go ahead and do that and tell us your affiliation and ask your question.
Hi, my name is Kim Braun, and I currently work with Go to Zero Strategies, and we complete a lot of EAR reports annually for many clients. One of my questions is the RDRS populates into the EAR annually. And when you look up the actual report for the city that you're completing the EAR for, and know that the city itself collects all of its own waste in-house, that's commercial and residential, knows exactly where it's going, and yet when the report comes, you might have tonnages off by thousands, not 1,000, like 50,000 tons different than what actually the city knows it has collected. How can you change that on the EAR report?
Well, that's more of an ear question. I can kind of chime in on that. I mean, you may track it a certain way, but the data gets reported by each entity in RDRS. So if they post it differently, then that's why sometimes the tonnage are differently, or maybe they haven't submitted. So those tonnages don't get counted because they didn't submit their report in time. Say they submit after the June 13th time when the data gets moved over to the ear, then that data would not be in the ear. But I'll let Chris or chime in about how to change the data in the ear.
Yeah, as soon as we get through this basic RDRS stuff, we're going to switch back to the ear screens and look at the disposal calculator. And one thing to add on, yeah, if the jurisdiction handles all of it, they've got either exclusive franchises or they handle all their own hauling, full service. There is still self-haul. So I don't think any system is 100% complete. There is no bleed in. Anyone who cleans out their garage one day might take something to a transfer station or a landfill directly. So we do run into that. But we can get into how to adjust that here in just a minute.
One thing I forgot to add is that the statute does allow jurisdictions to go to a facility and audit the data related to their disposal. So if you contact the facility directly, you have that right. You don't have to go through the RDRS non-compliance complaint line. The statute actually gives you authority to see your disposal related numbers. You can't look at their other data, but that is an option if you think your data is not being reported by a certain like transfer processor or landfill.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
All right, and then we have an additional question from Jessica Gell. Jessica, you should be able to unmute yourself now. Please go ahead and give us your affiliation and ask your question.
Hi, are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. This is kind of a random question, and I'm not sure if it's related to this, but I was wondering how to find what percentage of a total waste stream is residential versus non-residential. This may be related more specifically to the ear, though, versus RDRS.
Actually, it is related to RDRS that those data points are reported there. We haven't created a report for the public yet to show that.
Okay.
You might be able to submit a Public Records Act request because that, and we could kind of try to, I'd have to see what our team thinks about getting that data back to you, but it depends on what you want to see, like if it's like statewide versus individual counties or facilities, but you
Okay,
could go
yeah,
through that route and get that data most likely. Well, just submit a request and we get back to you on that. Sorry, I can't
okay,
hear. Yep.
great, thank you.
All right, those are the only two questions we've received so far. So Chris, if you want to
Okay, I'll
take
stop
us to the
sharing.
next item.
All right, we'll do. Also, I just put the email address for RDRS in the chat, rdrs@calrecycle.ca.gov. And that's where general question about RDRS should go. Stuff specific to the ear. Let me share the screen. And that's why I messed it up. It puts the little border around it on my side, but I have to press the extra share button to actually get this one. That's why. Sorry about that earlier at the beginning. I thought I was sharing. So we're going to actually jump a little bit into the ear. So this is the launch. So after you pick your jurisdiction, it takes you to this launch page. There's a little bit more kind of a summary of what Peter just discussed is right here underneath the ear login. And then a little bit below, this isn't in effect anymore, but the DRS system used to be part of Logic and all the reporting went through this. So there is still some of the older data up through 2019 is available here, but generally you're not going to have to look at that too much. But once again, kind of a little summary of what Peter discussed is here. And they might have been like, wow, did I really need to hear all that or see all that? This is like our one time a year to kind of go over RDRS information from a jurisdiction level. So for anyone that's new, it can be very helpful and it is very complex. There's a lot going on, but I think what Peter showed you regarding here's how you check your data. Here's how you can get it changed. You can request it directly from a facility you have a question about. That's all kind of contained within RDRS itself. Here we are in the year proper, and I'm going to jump straight into the disposal rate calculation, because this is where that data feeds into. And this is just a wee bit more. So this is the basic per capita disposal rate calculator. For this example, we are using Yuba Sutter. Anyone from the Yuba Sutter regional agency or the member cities, don't worry, we are not changing anything in your actual year. Anything we mess around with in here, this is all test data. And as of when this data was loaded into the year, this was their landfill disposal total. They did not have any transformation in 2023. We'll get back to that subject in just a second. Did not have any EMSW waste. Had just a little bit of green waste ADC and no exported green material. And that all totals up to this number. And then there are a series of very specific disposal reduction credits that are allowed to be used to submit a request to have your disposal data reduced by that amount. You can fill out the report year modification form, which also just got updated last week. And you basically can explain why you would need the credit, or if you are making a change regarding your overall disposal number, but it's not correct in RDRS and you feel that it should be significantly less or more. This is where you would explain any of that. There's other instructions regarding use of the form on the form itself, as well as further descriptions about the specific things that can be requested for a credit, and also specific to a misallocation or miscalculation. As Peter said, you can get your own, if you have a question about a certain facility and why it may have assigned something to you, you can request those records. Ideally, before the year is done, you can get that sorted out in RDRS. If not, this is sort of a form of last resort to say, hey, we tried to work with the facility, we did a complaint, we can't get it rectified. Here's why we think something is so egregiously off. And that's sort of where this data would be. Or that's where you would explain that to us if you were going to change the calculator. At which point I'm going to press edit and get into a little bit of the calculator functionality. So each of these lines of data comes directly from RDRS. You can't change that, but what you can change is the total. So let's say you look at RDRS a week from now, and instead of 177, it's 167, or the day before you are going to submit the year. You can put that number in, put a note on the form like I'm changing it for this reason because it was an RDRS. But one thing, and we're still massaging the exact way we want to do this each year. Really at a certain point later in the year after they are submitted and they start getting reviewed, because of some of the changes that happen in RDRS after the June 13th cutoff date when the data moves into the year, we are adjusting these before final staff review to more closely align with RDRS. So if something has changed in RDRS and you make that note and you don't submit a form, it's in RDRS. We will see it on the back end when we get to that point. But if you are really having trouble getting it changed in RDRS and you do need to change your total here, it's probably best to fill out a disposal modification form and send it to us along with your year. And on the next tab, there's a super cool document management button where you will be able to add that. And that screen might take a minute to load. Yeah, so you can add a new document from here. If you change anything in the calculator, it will make notes on this page. And also if you had any green ADC material, as noted in this field, there is another 1 or 2 required questions on this screen. But back to the calculator. If you're going to change anything, you would change the overall disposal total here. If you're going to request one of the credits as specified on the disposal modification form, you would make those changes here. And whatever you change on here, let's say you decide, you know what, I didn't want to do any of that, and I don't want to have one of those extra boxes trigger on the next page. You have an option to reset to the default data, and it'll send it right back to where it was. And the biggest change to the calculator this year, and probably the biggest one we've had since we integrated RDS in a couple years, I guess it's been 5 years now. Wow, time flies. Is there is no longer a per capita diversion rate credit for transformation waste. You used to be able to get up to 10% of your per capita rate, and you know, depending on how much transformation, that was an extra credit you would get off of this total. We have a web page that explains the changes right here. I will drop this one into the chat for everybody. So as of 2023, disposal sent to transformation no longer counts as a per capita rate diversion credit. Get over to my, there's my chat screen. There we go. So this page will be up through at least the end of the year in case anyone has questions about, wait, where'd the transformation go? It's not part of the equation anymore. That's kind of the long and short of it. So before we move along off of disposal calculator or RDRS questions, Peter, if you can stick around for a minute after. Katie, do we have anything in the queue?
We do have one question in the queue from Heather Heckman. Heather, I'm going to go ahead and enable you to unmute now. Please state your affiliation and ask your question.
Hi, with the City of Santee. So all of the green material was exported out of state. Do I also need to list it for a disposal reduction credit?
That's a good question, and we will point these out as we move along. There's a little hint, there's a little question mark box next to some of these that have a little bit more explanation about why this is here, what it means. And specific to this one, this was a change a couple years ago because trying to verify whether something was sent out of state for beneficial reuse or was sent out of state and disposed isn't something RDRS had the ability to do. So if it's sent out of state and actually used for beneficial reuse, yes, you can fill out a disposal modification and get that taken off. But you also, like the other things in the disposal mod, you have to have some receipts or some weight tickets that specifically explain it was sent out of state and here's what it was used for and verified by the facility it was sent to.
Okay. And then totally not related, but I've always wondered, what is the transformation tons? What does the transformation mean? I've just never known.
Transformation, well, on the web page, there's a whole list of all this. It's incineration, pyrolysis, distillation, or biological conversion other than composting. And it was really specific to the 3 sites in the state. There was one in Commerce, one in Long Beach, and one in Stanislaus County. The one in Commerce closed 4 years ago. I think the one in Long Beach closed sometime last year, and there is still one operating in Stanislaus for the time being.
Gotcha. I just had no clue what it was. Thank you.
Katie, anything else DRS related?
That's it for questions for the time being.
Marshall had a question in the chat.
I know I was trying to ask you, Peter, this actually came up. Let me put my camera on. I'm sorry. This came up outside of the webinar today, but is there a time, Peter, that you can think of that a jurisdiction would send material or material from the jurisdiction is sent to a facility or use that does not have an RDRS number?
There are certain situations like transfer processors that don't report over the quarterly limit of 100 tons received total for that quarter. So in those cases, if they're only getting like 50 tons, then if the jurisdiction sent to them, that would not be reported in RDRS. Land app is supposed to be reported per regulations, so I think it should be reported if it's
Okay, cool.
done. I'm trying to think. Other cases would be the RDS lets reporters create a facility if it's not in the system. If they don't find them there, they're called provisional facilities. So most of the time they're in there. So, but if they didn't report it for some reason, which they should have because they're required to, then that could be another case, but that's kind of misreporting. So most of the time, and this would be like facilities out of state, it's not in the system yet, and they just sent some tons to it, and then they got to add them, and they'd add them, and then they become an official facility, a provisional facility in RDRS. It's there. So hopefully that helped answer the question.
It sure did. Thank you so much.
I did have one more thing I forgot to talk about, and this comes up a lot with jurisdiction data, is regional agency data and how it's shown on the web. Basically, we're just showing it at the summed level of the members. So regional agency usually has multiple members that each get tons and it's totaled up. But the regulations allow the facilities to report it either at the regional agency level, which means the whole regional agency, or by a member. So that's why we don't show it on the public reports, because it'd be too confusing. But some regional agencies do have their data broken down that way by the facilities. That's how they report it. So if you want to see that data, you can send a request to the CalRecycle mailbox that Chris has been mentioning, RDRS, or you can do a PRA request to either way. And then if we have that data and they do report it that way, we'll send it to you, because it's not private data. It's just because it's too confusing to show in our public reports that we don't show it.
Yeah, PRA request is actually the way to go. That's how they've decided to handle that, because yeah, it can be confusing. I'd have to look at it. This number could have been reported all under the name Yuba Sutter Regional, or it could have been reported by the 5 different members and nothing under the Yuba Sutter name, or 5 different members and Yuba Sutter. So that's where it does get that's where it does get a little confusing. But we do have that data, as reported. So if there is a question about it, we can get that as is. But some counties are different than others. Some of them have never reported under the RA name. Some spent a decade reporting only under that, and we have almost zero data for individual jurisdictions, other than a little bit of that self-haul data I mentioned. Because when a hauler's truck goes to a facility, they might know or have it coded as, oh, that's the regional agency truck, and it goes in as such. But if someone's self-hauling to a facility and they say, where are you from? They'll give them the city name. They don't know that they're in a regional agency. That's inside baseball kind of stuff. So that's where the numbers do, and some people have wondered, wow, there's 170,000 tons to the RA, 5 tons to city A, 15 tons to city B, 1 ton to city C. How'd that work out? That's stuff that was probably simple. All right, Katie, any other disposal related questions?
Not at this point, but if you guys think of any, please go ahead and put them in the Q&A pane.
Okay, cool. Well, with that, thank you so much, Pete. If you want to hang out for a couple minutes, just in case something else comes up, that'd be cool. But other than that, we'll jump back to the main ear page. Just a couple things I would like to point out. There's a link to the MyLogic help page we already looked at. There's also a link to an updated user's guide. I think it got posted yesterday around noon. So if you're looking at it early in the morning, yesterday was the old one. Just took a little bit to get that accessible and uploaded on the site. A little summary about what we mentioned about transformation no longer working. You'll find that in this latest news box. There's another little bit about RDRS here. And at this point, I am going to hand off the screen and the ear discussion to our T. Lau, who is going to go over all the big important SB 1383 and other exciting items that we're all here to hear about. RT, take it away.
Great. Thank you, Chris. Just give me 1 second to start sharing my screen. So hello, everyone. My name is Arti Lal. I am one of the senior environmental scientists here at our local assistance branch at CalRecycle. Hold on 1 second. Let me share my screen.
Sure, after you pick your screen, it's going to light up.
Oh yeah, you have to
you
hit
have
share.
to press the share button also. Yeah, yeah.
I almost missed that too. Okay, everyone see my screen okay?
Yeah. Can you zoom in a little bit too? Just because it is kind of a wide view and hard to see.
I don't even know if that works. Oh, it does. Okay.
Oh, yeah. You should be able to control scroll.
Is that okay?
Do the zoom. A little bit more, I think. A little more.
How's that?
Yeah, I think that's at least readable.
Okay. Okay, so again, my name is Arti Lal. I'm one of the senior environmental scientists here at our local assistance branch. And today I will be providing a brief overview of the electronic annual report alongside Chris. And I say brief overview because we did not do too many updates to the report this year. We actually only have just a couple of new bullet points and new tooltips that we added. Nothing in the questions and nothing in the functionality of the report has changed. So all of that is the same. So before I jump into the ear, I did put into the chat our model reporting tools webpage. And I just want to point out that if you are new or if you do need more in-depth guidance on how to complete the report, if you go into our model reporting tools webpage, scroll down past the reporting information, we have our past webinars linked. Under the webinars section. So we have 2 webinars from last year. You can go directly into the YouTube videos there. Those are fairly more detailed than what we will be going over today. And we also have webinars from 2022. And these are really great because we have our city and county focused webinars, regional agency focused webinars, and then of course, for the special districts that provide solid waste collection services. So we have those different focuses if you need the extra, step-by-step walkthrough. Okay, so with that, I will get started. So this is the summary page, and on here, like Chris mentioned, you have a box that has the latest news, some updates that were done, and you'll also be able to select the various tabs for the report here, or you can find the links here. So on the summary page, you'll also be able to see which sections are complete and which are not. A green check mark, like the additional information link here, means that that section is complete. A red check mark with the cross means that that section is not complete. And I will take questions, or we will take questions after I finish discussing or going through the ear. So we'll have plenty of time for questions. Okay, so let's go into the procurement tab. We have one bullet or tooltip that we added to the procurement section, and it can be found here under the recovered organic waste product procurement line. And the update or the bullet is the following is your jurisdiction's annual procurement target and does not take into account AB 1985. If you're not familiar with AB 1985, this is hyperlinked for you, so you can open the link and go into the Assembly bill and read more about that there. I'm sorry, this is kind of zoomed in for me, so it's new. So bear with me if I'm, okay, get a little confused here. So that's the only update we made to the procurement section. This is a nice section to go over, you know, just the general editing features of the EAR. So I'll do that right now. So to edit any page, we have two edit buttons, one at the very top and one at the very bottom of the page. It doesn't matter which one you select. When you select the editing button on the page, it opens the editing features of the page. So now you'll see that, you know, the various grids you're able to edit. Some grids you have to select edit to go into it to edit more, and I'll show you that in just a minute. Other grids are, you'll just be editing it on in this page. So we'll go into that in just a second. So I went ahead and pre-populated some of this, so it'll be, you know, easier to go through for demonstration purposes. And I left Yuba City blank so I can show you what it looks like when we go into the editing feature here. So select edit. So this opened a form into the recovered organic waste product procured grid for Yuba City. So you see the jurisdiction here and the form with the questions here. Like Chris mentioned, we're using a regional agency, so that's why you see multiple jurisdictions here. If you're a single jurisdiction, you will not see all the, you know, other jurisdictional names there. And when you open up a form, a lot of times there'll be further instructions and further guidance for you to review to complete that section. So in this case, it states that all fields are required. Just as an overview, any question that has a red asterisk, that means that that's a required field. So if you try to save something without entering anything into that red asterisk field, it will not save for you. So you have to enter something in that question. So let's say that Yuba City did not procure compost for 2023. So they would enter 0 for that section, and doing that allows it to save. If you're in a section that is not a quantitative question, so it doesn't, you know, it's not a question that requires numbers, you can enter NA or not applicable to if it's a required field. Okay. So moving on. So this section here, and let me just zoom out so I can show you a little bit of all three colors. This section is similar to the grid above, so I'm not going to get into it. So here you can see we have 3 different sections and they each have a different colored bar. So all that means is that a green bar means that that section is specifically related to 1383, so it's an SLCP section. If it's blue like this one, it usually will have the word combined next to it. That means that that question combines the various laws, so AB 939, 341, 1826, SB 1383 could all be combined in that section. And then the light gray bar indicates that it's a SHRI program. So some of the questions will be like this in some of the tabs where you will just be selecting all that apply. So in this case, you'll just check the checkboxes that apply to this question. And then moving down to the SHRI program. So for the SHRI programs, in order for the page or section to be marked complete, you do have to check the box. And when you check the box, it turns it turns this into a hyperlink. So if you need to make any changes to the program details, you can click into the hyperlink and that'll open up a program details page, which then you can go in and make your edits. Yeah, so you select edit, make your changes to the program details there and hit save. If you're entering notes only, you can briefly describe the program here. Just know that this text box has a character limit of 2,500 characters. If you have more than 2,500 characters that you need to add to the notes section, you can do it in the diversion program details area. So you can enter more than 2,500 characters here. And let me see, once everything is complete, you want to save the page. And if all of the sections are complete, then you will see a green check mark next to that section name. So here you see a green check mark next to procurement because I went in and pre-populated all of the different questions. So you'd be able to see that green check mark.
RT, I'm going to jump in. 1 second because you threw a little trick in there. When you went to the diversion program box proper, you pressed Control and hit the link, which opened in a new tab. For most folks, when they're filling out that page, if they want to go into the diversion programs, you can open it up as a Control tab and it'll put it in our tab. But normally you would want to press Save on the screen so that any of the other grids or anything you filled out save first.
Before opening up that.
Yeah, it should give you a warning if you're going to leave the page without saving, but you know, people can miss that warning. It's different in different browsers and different systems. So just make sure you press save often, as often as you can anywhere you are, because moving around, doing certain things, or if you get up and get distracted for a while, when you come back to the screen and it hasn't been saved, you're very likely to lose anything that you would put in.
Yeah, so what Chris is mentioning is that you can select that, right? And so now you see a pop-up that came up. Are you sure you want to leave the page? Because if you didn't save it, then all of the data will be lost. So if you didn't save the page, you can hit cancel, save the page, and then open it again. And it'll take you back there. Okay. And I think that's it for procurement. The next section I wanted to go over is collection systems. And so we didn't make any changes to this section, but it is a little bit more complicated than the other sections, especially the collection container systems grid. So I just wanted to spend some time to review that. A lot of the sections, especially the collection container system, has some instructions and notes and bullets here. And I'll go over some of this to clarify a couple of things. So again, to open the editing features of the page, you want to select edit. And now you can see that, you know, all of the other grids are able to get edited. Okay, so this paragraph here discusses waivers, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. What I want to mention first is the add additional hauler option that we have. So this section is for jurisdictions to enter their collection container system and the number of generators for the collection container system. So when you're entering the information in this section, you should be entering the container collection system that is provided by your jurisdiction. You only have to use the add additional hauler option if a different container system needs to be entered. So for an example, if you only have one type of collection container system that's offered in the entire jurisdiction, let's say it's 3 container, then you only have to use that first row or the first, hauler to report that. You don't need to use the add additional hauler button to add multiple 3 containers. And I'll go into that. If you do have to add an additional container system, I'll go into that in a little bit and show you how that's done. First, let's go into one of these grids and open the form for the collection container system and see what that looks like. So I opened it for Wheatland. So you can see the jurisdiction name here, and the form is below the jurisdiction name. Here you also have further instructions on how to complete the form. And so that part points out that we have, or this form has its own left to right scroll bar. So you can find the scroll bar right above the compostable plastics green little bar there. So in order for you to save this page or cancel if you don't want to save, you will find those buttons at the center of the scroll bar. So you have to sort of scroll to get there because this grid is rather large. The other thing I wanted to mention here is that we've noticed, there can be some confusion with the number of generators. So the number of generators should reflect the jurisdiction's collection container system. So it shouldn't necessarily be the number of containers a generator has on site. And that note is right here. The collection container system selected represents how a jurisdiction and or hauler processes material, not the number of containers a generator has on site. And so for an example, let me actually just fill this out. Let's just put, and again, for hauler name, you don't have to report the name of the hauler. You can identify them however you want. And I'll just put hauler 1. I'll say this hauler does not collect residential, so I can use my example. So let's say you have a hauler that, or you have 300 generators that have a 3 container system, and 100 of the generators were issued a de minimis waiver for an organic spin, so they don't have an organic spin because they have a de minimis waiver. And so in this case, you will still include all of the generators in 3 container. You will not differentiate between saying, oh, 200 have 3 container and then 100 have 2 container because they have a de minimis waiver. You will include them all as a 3 container system. And answer this question pops up, are organics allowed in the gray container? You would answer that, scroll over and hit save. And then you can see that information is saved. I lost the scroll bar. So if you want to see the commercial, you have to scroll all the way down to see what was entered for commercial, because this grid is pretty large. Let's see. If you do have another, a different collection container system that you want to add, you can use that add additional hauler button and enter, select the jurisdiction if you're an RA, enter the hauler name or however you want to identify it, maybe put hauler 2, whatever you prefer, and then complete the form again the same way. The other thing I wanted to point out is the low population or rural exemption, high elevation option that some jurisdictions will see on their report. So what the low population waiver checkbox does in the system anyway, it allows you to bypass some of the required fields. So if I try to save this without entering anything in, the system won't let me save because these are required fields. But if I'm a jurisdiction and I have an approved CalRecycle low population waiver, I can select that low population waiver checkbox and save, and that allows me to bypass the requirement to enter the number of generators. So you'll find that option in the various sections that has that ability or, you know, that reporting requirement. Oh, and I will say that if you are a county, an unincorporated county, and you have certain census tracts that are waived and certain census tracts that are not waived, you don't have to select the low population waiver button. You can just enter, you know, go through and complete the section as a normal jurisdiction would. Or if you do decide to select that low population option, just to make sure that you still are completing the form for those generators that are not waived. So for the generators in those census tracts that are not waived. And the other thing on this page I wanted to just go over really quickly is the RDRS table that we have in some of these questions. So I just opened up the compostable plastics and plastic bags section. So let's say you answered yes, that compostable plastics are allowed in the green container. You can go ahead and identify the facility in the text box or use this RDRS table. It is fairly long and it's not alphabetical. So one of the things we wanted to point out is to make it easier, you can use the Control F button, and that'll help you find the facility that you're looking for, and you can select it that way. Go ahead and cancel this. And I think that's it for this section. We go into the enforcement and monitoring section. So this section, we did not update anything here either, but I just wanted to point out one thing. So we have the SLCP section, AB 1826 and 341, so MCR and more. If you are capturing all of your generators in the SLCP section, you can report the same numbers in the MCR and more section. So statute still requires jurisdictions to report on 1826 and 341. So That's why we still have these in the report. And of course, for those jurisdictions that have a low population waiver or rural exemption, they have to report on MCR and more. So that's why those are still there. But if you're capturing all your generators here, you can use the same, you can report the same numbers in the MCR and more sections. And then one more section that we added a couple tooltips and bullets to, and that's in the enforceable mechanisms and ordinances section. We added a note in the contact changes section here, which states contact changes are subject to CalRecycle approval. Completing the EAR does not necessarily imply that this should be you. If a user requests to be added as an SB 1383 contact, CalRecycle will require confirmations from the existing contacts, whether it being the existing SLCP or the jurisdiction contacts. So to make a contact change, again, select edit to edit the page, and then you can go into the grid to edit. It will automatically be, I'm pretty sure it will automatically be set to no. So you have to switch to yes to type in the new contact information and hit save. The other update that we made here is that we updated these tooltips for the definition of SLCP primary and SLCP official. And these definitions, it's exactly what we have on our webpage. Okay. Oh, and then the last bullet here, we added that special districts are not required by SLCP regulations to adopt CalGreen and MWELO ordinances or enforceable mechanisms. And with that, I think, yeah, so that's those are all of the updates that we made. And I don't have anything else to review. So I think we will just open it up for questions. If you have any questions on any of the other sections, we can definitely get into those as well.
All right, we do have a few questions in the queue. The first one is from Maya Hoffman. Maya, you should be able to unmute yourself. Please tell us your affiliation and go ahead and ask your question.
Good afternoon. I'm Maya Hoffman from the city of Santa Maria. I was wondering, we have historically reported the pounds of retreaded tires and gallons of renewable diesel that we have procured for the SHRE program 1030-SR-PMT, and I'm just wondering if that is still necessary.
Perhaps you're waiting on me to answer that. I'm not the procurement expert, but as far as diversion programs go, you can continue to report information that you were before in that note box. As RT pointed out, if you go to the individualized page, let me share again really quick. I gotta remember to press that second button. There we go. Sorry. You can provide additional info on, I guess, the non-SO required organic procurement, because this is more of a general procurement program for the jurisdiction. So you can look at previous notes that were in here. There is an option to report on specific tons related to the program right here. But it's this, a lot of parts of this annual report, especially with the diversion program notes, that it's sort of your report. You can tell us what you want. If there's, follow-up needed, or we don't understand, or like, hey, what about this? You used to report on, now you don't. When someone will follow up with you. But this is where you could get into that, as far as the non-specified procurement requirements.
Thank you.
And then Chris, if I can share, this is Marshall. I think if the question is asking if that's required, I don't think that that level of specificity is required, but it's certainly nice for you to provide that level of information if it's available, because we do, you know, use this information to inform us in LAMD for future technical assistance. And then Jace, as a part of CalRecycle's compliance evaluation, also uses the air information. And that will be, this particular information that we're talking about is relevant to AB 939 implementation. So it's not required, but it does help us understand your implementation for us to cater assistance and also in determining overall compliance when it's time.
All right, our next question is coming from Mackie Forgy. Mackie, you should be able to unmute yourself. Please go ahead and state your affiliation and ask your question.
Hello, this is Mackie Forgy with Santa Barbara County. I was just wondering if you could go back to the disposal rate calculation tab and show me how you navigated to the additional questions for the green material ADC. And I'm also just hoping to clarify if those questions are always required if a jurisdiction has green material ADC tons, or if those questions only need to be answered if you are not meeting your target per capita rate.
Those are good questions. I don't think I've answered those in a couple of years. So thank you. So there's two ways to get to that second. One is directly from, from the home page here. You can go directly to calculation factors, or if you're on the disposal rate calculation, you can jump to it right here in this breadcrumb, or there's a tab. And specific to these questions, since we're on the page, so the first question here about disposal rate accuracy is really a lot of that. The idea is it comes back to why your target may be off for some reason. At this point, generally, those targets were established a long time ago. If there was some situation, we would know, but feel free to repeat it. But also, you could use this also as a brief description, maybe related to a disposal modification. And as far as the specific green ADC questions, you only have to answer them one if this box is checked, this number 3, and because this year there was 0.02 tons. If that box is checked, this first box is a required answer for anyone. If it's got the red asterisk and it's there, you would have to answer it. There's also a little checkbox here saying that that wasn't our green waste and we are working on it, but we're not going to explain what we're going to do with the ADC because it's not ours. But also, as we mentioned earlier, everything that went through the hauler probably was hopefully used as taken to the compost facility, used as some other kind of beneficial reuse and not reported as disposal. Why this about 400 pounds out of 178,000 pounds of disposal? Why, or 178,000 tons of disposal? Why there was 400 pounds of green ADC used? Hard to say. And that could just be a simple answer of, our plan to divert to green ADC is that it shouldn't be being used as the ADC in the first place. We'll try to figure out where this came from. But it could be a misreport, in which case you would check the box. The second and third question here is, yes, if you are not meeting your target and you have green ADC, you have to fill in these 2 additional questions. And I'm not going to try to put out an answer for these because there could be various ways that one might fulfill that. One is, even if your hauler's controlling everything, you keep getting a lot of green ADC that's self-hauled. Perhaps you can work with that landfill to say, don't use it as ADC, use it for something else, please. Send it to the compost. And potentially you keep having a misreport issue, and that would be something else you could describe in this section.
Got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, our next question is from Deanna Watkins Howie. Deanna, you should be able to unmute yourself. Please go ahead and do that if you can and state your affiliation and ask your question.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so my question, I'm sorry, I'm with the city of Placerville, and it is my first time doing an EAR, so I apologize if this is a very simple question, but I thought I had heard that the generators, it was something that said generators should represent the jurisdiction type of collection, but I'm not, so I wasn't sure if that means some type of different type of generator.
So, Chris,
I think
can you
Artie
go
mentioned
into
it.
the collections? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'll drive on this one so you don't have to. Again, we'll switch back and forth as we need to.
Can you hear me now? Okay, I don't know if it was working earlier. I've been having sound issues. Sorry about that. The number of generators, so we do have, and I think I forgot to mention this, that we have tooltips. So if you hover over the question marks that we have throughout the year, we do have tooltips that have further explanation or even definitions. So the number of generators here, it's for the tooltip, it says the total generators can be the number of customers or accounts. And I think that was your question, I believe.
It was, thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, perfect.
All right, our next question was submitted anonymously, so I can't ask them to unmute. I'll just go ahead and read it for everybody. They're trying to confirm that even if a jurisdiction has 10 haulers, if they all use a 3-container system, you can just enter it all as hauler 1.
Correct. So the reporting requirement is that jurisdictions are to report on the number of generators per the collection system. Let me actually find the exact language here. So the total number of generators that receive each type of organic waste collection service provided by the jurisdiction, and that can be found in Article 13, Section 18994.2. So based off of that, that is what is required to report on. So, you know, long answer short, yes, to answer your question, you're correct.
And RT, I think we have a lot of questions on collection systems coming up if you want to take over the screens again.
Yeah, that works.
And the next question we have in the queue is also an anonymous question. They are asking, can CalRecycle staff please clarify on the reporting period for the 2023 EAR? Is it January 1st, 2023 to December 31st, 2023?
Yes, it is the calendar year of 2023, and the disposal information, that's what that is based on. So anything that went into RDRS for Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4 of 2023, that is what's totaled up and included as disposal. And as far as what you would report, you know, for procurement or edible food, any of those things that happened during calendar year 23.
All right, thank you, Chris. The next question is from Andy Schneider. Andy, you should be able to unmute yourself now. Please go ahead and unmute, state your affiliation, and ask your question.
Hi, my name's Andy Schneider, Waste Program Manager for Alameda County. And we actually had my question answered in the session. It had to do with if only part of our jurisdiction has a low pop waiver. So I understand now that we will not check that box and be able to answer for the remaining generators. So thank you.
All right.
But
Well,
actually, as a clarification on that, you could still check that box, just indicating that you have a waiver, because if you do, it's in the system. The only way that either the low pop waiver or the rural waiver boxes show up is if you're already pre-coded in the system with an approved waiver. So you could still check that box and still answer all the individual questions. Because that, I mean, we know you have a waiver, but that's sort of you acknowledging yes as well. And ideally, you wouldn't be including any of the waived areas in those totals, but totally up to you. Really, what that box allows you to do is skip a lot of the required fields. So in cases where an entire city is waived, that way they don't have to put in something on every single field.
And Chris, I think for regional agencies, right, if one jurisdiction in the regional agency has a low population waiver, it populates it for all of them. So just be careful if you know, if it says low population and it's in a regional agency, to make sure that you have an approved waiver for that jurisdiction.
all right. The next question that we have in the queue is from an anonymous participant. If the hauler collects in areas with and without a low population waiver, are the low population waived areas considered 3 container like the de minimis waived generators?
I don't know if I quite understand the question. So if you can reword the question or reach out to us, you can send it to the Logic or SLCP inbox, and we can follow up with you. That would be great. Thank you.
Or alternatively, if you send a message directly to me in the chat here, then I can circle back around to this question and unmute you so that you can clarify what exactly it is that you're asking. But yes, you can also follow up via email and we will answer your question that way. This next one is also anonymous. This participant is wondering, are we only required to report on accounts with 2-yard or greater MSW? Oh.
I don't understand that question either. Chris, do you understand that?
I think that's more specific to MCR and more, which you didn't get into that section.
Okay. Perhaps their question will be addressed when we do get into that section, or they could go back and look at a previous year's webinar that goes into that in more detail, potentially. The anonymous participant, you're also welcome to submit the question to the SLCP inbox, and we will answer via email.
Actually, RT, can you go back to the in-report homepage from the breadcrumb at the top?
Say that one more time, Chris.
Use the breadcrumb at the top, go back to annual report homepage, right beneath the yellow bar.
Go back to the annual report.
Yeah,
this one?
that one, yeah. And don't save. And then zoom in on the latest news box. Because this is kind of related, and we did add this note because the question keeps coming up. Note number 2. Statute still requires jurisdictions to report on AB 1826 and AB 341. The year was restructured to reduce the, move my screen, to reduce the burden on jurisdictions as much as possible when reporting on AB 939, 341, 1826, and SB 1383, especially in areas where there's potential overlap in the laws. For example, if all your generators are captured in the 1383 reporting section, SLCP section of enforcement and monitoring, you can report the same numbers in the MCR and more sections. And if you jump over to the enforcement and monitoring piece, now granted, I'm not the expert on all the details of this, but in terms of the 2 yards, I mean, the collection systems tab is anyone who's got whatever hauler or, you know, anyone who's got any kind of system. Whereas these sections about MCR and more for mandatory commercial organics recycling, mandatory commercial recycling, that's where the 2 yard part comes in. So depending on what type of report you have, you know, depending on if you have a rural exemption or a low population or exemption, or a special district where those laws do not necessarily apply the same. This is the part that is more specific to, or this page is what's more specific to 2 cubic yard reporters. But if you're already doing full 1383 implementation, it's sort of an overlay. And those 2 yarders are already included in your overall collection.
Okay. I think your answer to that question may actually have answered at least part of the next one that I have in the queue. But just to be sure, I am going to ask Rachel Balsley to please go ahead and unmute yourself and give us your affiliation and go ahead and ask your question.
Balsley with Stop Waste, or covering Alameda County jurisdictions. So we help provide data for many of our Alameda County member agencies. And I was specifically asking about the enforcement and monitoring section. I thought I recalled there being some threshold on enforcement activities, so NLVs and penalty orders, being maybe only those that are 2 cubic yards of total weekly service and above should be in those counts. But that's what I wanted to verify. I also have a second part of the question. Should I ask that now as well?
Let's get through this first one.
I was going to say,
Okay.
Marshall, can you provide some clarity on that?
I'm trying to, sorry, look, so the should the NOV and penalty order numbers be to those sites or accounts that are I don't think that it's limited to the 2 cubic yards. The 2 cubic yards is there is a requirement to conduct compliance reviews. And that's where that 2 cubic yards comes in, ensuring that everybody, that all the generators that are commercial, that have 2 cubic yards or more, have service. And if not, that's where you would be also following up with enforcement. But having said that, a jurisdiction could also be doing the same within the tier below that, those that are under 2 cubic yards. So if that's what was being done, you could include those in your numbers, and you would just want to include a note in the additional description with those specifics.
Okay, so that's helpful. So in NOVs and citations, it could be all size accounts if that's who we're issuing to. But you also said the compliance review might only be 2 cubic yards and above. So the SLCP one that's at the top, would that only be 2 cubic yards?
It's going to be whatever you use, but the regulations require a compliance review, and the threshold for that is the 2 cubic yards. But a jurisdiction might be doing more than that with all of the businesses. So the regulations require it for 2 cubic yard or more for the compliance compliance review. That's just how it's defined, but a number of jurisdictions apply that across the board for the commercial sector. And so then you report it that way.
Thank you. And one final question on when we're adding in the NOVs and penalty orders. So especially on the penalty orders, we are issuing some citations, multiple citations to certain sites. So should it be the number issued or the number of sites who've received either an NOV or a citation? Because they will be different numbers.
Yeah, I believe the language is on the number of the penalty orders, not the specific generator. So, and then again, in your note, this is a really good opportunity for us to talk about what goes in these additional descriptions. So that's something that you could just clarify in that there could be, that this is the number of violations and it could represent more than one violation to a specific generator. That's a great question.
Actually, one more came up for me because the enforcement actions resolved, you know, like it's the same citation, but at a higher fine amount. So if I did the number of penalty orders is say 100, and that's really only to 50 accounts, I'm only going to resolve up to 50. I'm not going to resolve all 100 because it's just the same account. So it might be misleading to folks reviewing if the number of citations is inflated because of multiple citations.
And again, I think that's something that can be fleshed out. And I'm also considering how we use this information, right?
Yeah.
So 2 parts, one for us to be able to provide you, you know, tailored customer technical assistance. And the other would be when we're conducting a compliance evaluation. And in either case, we're going to clarify with you exactly what your data means. And part of that is done in the conference call that you have with our team each year and the site visits. So we can, and those details go into our notes as well. So I think that you're paying a great level of detail to providing accurate information. I think you can vet that out a little bit with the notes, and then combined with collaboration with our team, that will get put into greater detail with our notes.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you.
All right. Our next question is coming from Rika Abraham. Rika, you should be able to unmute. Please go ahead and state your affiliation and ask your question.
Hi, all. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right. Thank you. Yes, I'm Rika with the West Contra Costa Waste Management Authority. My question is, if our compost facility accepts compostable plastic bags, but not compostable plastics, there's a section that asks about compostable plastics and then plastic bags. I'm just wondering how properly I should, how should I fill that out so it makes sense without having to add a whole bunch of notes on both?
And you said you had compostable bags?
Yeah, so the facility will accept like BPI compostable bags, but not compostable plastic and not regular plastic bags.
So okay.
I'm not sure how relevant this might be, but are they pulling the compostable plastic bags out? I know at least one of the facilities that the jurisdictions I work with take material to does that. So they are not, in fact, composting these compostable plastic bags. There is a removal step happening.
I believe they are shredding them and composting them.
Oh.
Okay. So I'm trying to understand your question. I think I'm just getting a little bit confused. So this section here is for compostable plastics and plastic bags. So the regulations require jurisdictions to report the facility that compostable plastics that the green container allows compostable plastics in. And then also if organics are allowed to be placed in plastic bags. So these are the two, or this is the section to answer those two questions. Does that help, or can you?
Well, so that's my
maybe
confusion. Maybe I should rephrase.
Okay.
So in this section, so the facility in the collection of green materials in the green container, they allow for compostable plastic bags. Do I add that information in the compostable plastic section or in the plastic bag section with a note?
So compostable plastics would be here. So you would add that in this section. And then this section is for if organics are allowed to be placed in plastic bags in the green container.
Yeah, so I just wanted to make sure because the facility does not view the compostable plastic bags as like a compostable plastic fork, for example. They're two separate things. So I just want to make sure by checking the box that says compostable plastics allowed in the green container, I'm not triggering to CalRecycle saying that, you know, compostable plastic materials are allowed. It's specifically just bags. So I want to make sure that I'm putting that into the correct section.
Okay.
So you would put it in the compostable plastic. I guess your note could be that it's not considered plastic. I don't know. But the important thing, Ty, here also is that we want to make sure that if you're collecting either of those items, that we know which facility and that in your implementation record, now I'm going outside of the ear here, but in your implementation record that you have notification from that facility that they can process those materials. And so that's why we're asking those. We want to, one is in the regulations, but we want to know not only if they're accepted, but which facilities, and then taking it full circle, you'll want to ensure that you have documentation from those facilities that they accept and handle those materials.
Okay, I think that makes sense. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't causing confusion by reporting in one box versus the other, but I have been adding the note specifically that it's just compostable plastic bags and not compostable plastic other items. So I think, thank you for the clarification.
All right, our next question is coming from Kira Lowe of Joint Venture. Kira, you should be able to unmute yourself. Please go ahead and unmute and ask us your question.
Yeah, hi. I think this will just be a quick one. I think you answered it, but I just wanted to clarify that there's been no changes to the questions or the kind of prompts information, you know, the little I's provided for the edible food section or the enforcement and inspection section. I haven't seen any. You said you didn't make any changes, but I just want to confirm since you didn't run through the edible food section at all.
Yes, that's correct. So the only, and I think my screen stopped sharing. So the only additions or tooltips were made to the procurement section, and that was this tooltip here, and then the enforceable mechanism and ordinances for the contact changes and the ordinances down here. There were no changes made to any of the questions or any of the functions for the year this year.
All right, thanks for clarifying, RT. Our next two questions actually come from Thomas Hammond. Thomas, you should be able to unmute now. Please go ahead and unmute. Tell us your affiliation and ask your first question.
Thomas Hammond. I'm with Mid-Valley Disposal. We take care of a number of jurisdictions in the Central Valley. I have two questions. One, I'm pretty sure I know the answer to, but the second one's a little bit more in depth. So if an FRO, a food recovery organization, falls within an unincorporated county, a jurisdiction or a city, they would not report the donation totals, correct? The unincorporated county or wherever the FRO is located would report those donations, correct?
I just happen to be one of our edible food recovery subject matter folks. So I think I'll take that one. So yes, the reporting would happen for whatever jurisdiction the food recovery organization is located in. So that is how we prevent double counting, is by counting only where the food recovery organization is. So that means you could have commercial edible food generators in neighboring jurisdictions donating their food and having it only be counted for the jurisdiction the food recovery organization is physically located in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. My second question is, what if a church or another FRO is piggybacking off of a larger FRO, which means the generator is going to send it to the church, and then the church is going to turn around and send it to California Food Link or one of these other bigger organizations? Because it touches that piggyback, it still doesn't have to be reported in that jurisdiction, correct? It's ultimately where it lands finally, correct?
Actually, it is whoever is picking up the donated food from the commercial edible food generator is, for the purposes of reporting and inspections and regulations, that is the entity we consider to be the food recovery organization or food recovery service. So if it gets picked up from a grocery store by a food bank, which then passes it on to a food closet, which then passes it on to a church, only the food bank needs to keep track of their reporting. And the food bank in that case is the entity considered to be the food recovery organization. If the smaller pantries and stuff are not accepting donated food from commercial edible food generators, they would not fit the definition of a food recovery organization or service, and the regulations don't require them to do any reporting.
Okay. So whoever's picking up the donation is reporting it.
Basically, yes.
Even if they're using a third party, even like if their contract is with Food Link, but they're going through the church first to get it to Food Link, the church is going to be reporting it. Therefore, the jurisdiction will be reporting that, correct?
Well, if the church, that's how it should work in theory, but the Food Link could designate somebody else to pick it up. If Food Link wanted to accept responsibility for doing that reporting, that would be okay in our eyes, but that is, yeah, that's something that I think we might want to discuss a little bit further and get back to you about. Would you be okay with following up with the SLCP inbox? And then the edible food recovery team will discuss amongst ourselves and make sure we're getting you a high quality answer for your question.
Yeah, not a problem. Thank you.
All right. I'll drop that email in the chat. Thanks. All right. And our next question is going to be from Christine Williamson, who has a similar question to a previous question. Christine, I'm going to go ahead and ask you to unmute. Please go ahead and tell us your affiliation and let us know what your question is, please.
Hi, Christine Williamson with Kern County Public Works Department on behalf of Kern Unincorporated. It was actually to one of the anonymous questions that people, you weren't clear as to what the question was. Regarding the collection systems, and my apologies to Artie as well, because I had a distraction when she was talking about those. But for a jurisdiction where, Kern Incorporated, we have 13 haulers, low population waivers, high elevation waivers, in addition to, de minimis waivers that we're are issuing. However, for reporting purposes in the container collection systems, if you have a hauler that has both waived areas and non-waived areas, in terms of low population or high elevation waivers, say that the hauler has 300, residents that they're picking up from, we're, 300 generators. However, 200 generators are in the non-waived area, but 100 generators are in the waived area. How would CalRecycle prefer we report that?
And when
So
you
would
say waived areas, are you
Like-
referring to department issued waivers, like a low
Yes.
population,
Yes,
high elevation? Okay.
Only department issued waivers, not talking about the jurisdiction issued.
Okay. Yeah, so if you're a county that has only certain census tracts waived for low population or certain areas that have high elevation, and you have that option to select low population. So let me just show you here. So, I mean, you can select the low population checkbox when you're editing it. And it's right here, sorry. Low population checkbox. When you're entering the information, just make sure to include the number of generators that are not waived. So all of the generators in the areas that are not high elevation or not low population, you would still select one of these options and enter the number of, let's say you said 300, you would enter the generators there. Does that answer your question?
Sort of. So only the ones that are not waived in that section. The generators located in the waived census tracts hauled by that particular hauler. Say, we had 300 generators that you just entered, and then another 100 generators in the waived area that would not be reported in that container option, correct?
Correct. You do not have to report the number of waived generators if they have a low population.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
And then I actually did have another related question to that in terms of if we have a census tract with a high elevation waiver, but not low population. So they're waived from food in the green bin. You know what? I'm sorry. Never mind for that question. I kind of answered it myself.
Yeah. So it's just the food waste allowed in the gray container for those.
Correct.
Right?
So we would still select, on that lower section, we would say that there is some organic waste allowed in the gray container because of the high elevation waiver for those generators. If we said, there's the 3 container system, and then organics allowed in the gray container because they don't have to put food in the green bin, would we select that?
I believe this question is specifically related to if you are sending your gray container to a high diversion organic waste processing facility. Okay. Correct me if I'm wrong, Marshall, but because you have that high elevation waiver, I don't think you have to select here.
Okay.
Because it's still a 3 container system, right? It just doesn't have the food waste.
That's correct. Well, once it's passed, yes.
Okay, sorry.
We have other issues going on with that, but
it's a good question.
If we had a 3 container system there with the high elevation waiver, and so food waste technically could be allowed into the gray container without the gray container going to a high diversion facility, only for that high elevation waiver area. Would we select that we are allowing organic waste into the gray container, or that?
You can, and then I would just include a note.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say, the additional description box is a really good place to
I have
write
used that
any
a
more
lot.
of that, because it does sound like you have quite a number of layers involved on some of these. And so each of these haulers, each of these systems you put in, you can provide that additional description specific to that situation. Because
okay.
Yeah, so because basically it sounds like you have haulers that are going into different tracks. Some tracks are waived, some are not. Parts of some other tracks are waived for elevation.
Yes.
Yeah, that's do your best, and yeah, definitely use the additional description box to possibly break that down. And looking at your past report, you do have a couple notes in there. Not to this level of detail, but you can always elaborate a little bit more if you're unsure.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and we have one last question. Maybe we can sneak it in under the wire. This person is wondering about the question that refers to department issued waivers and wants to ensure that the department in question is CalRecycle, correct?
The department in question, capital D, is CalRecycle, and that's if you look at how the regulations are written, there's a section about department issued waivers that's specifically for things that CalRecycle issues, as far as a low population for a jurisdiction, a low population for specific census tracts, elevation waivers, and not that it really is involved in here, we also issue waivers to non-local entities and local education agencies. And yeah, the department is us, the department, and yes, we know you have your own departments, but that's more under the your departments locally would be jurisdiction issued waivers.
All right, thanks, Chris. And that is about it for our queue of questions, and it is now a little after 3:30.
Actually, Katie, there is one more on food recovery.
Yeah, it's more a comment than a question, and frankly, the relationships between food recovery organizations can get very complicated and dense, and if you have questions about a particular situation occurring in your jurisdiction, please reach out to either the SLCP inbox, or if you have been in contact with your CalRecycle local assistance liaison, reach out to them, and we would be happy to discuss the situation with you further. But these are things where it's a little difficult to give blanket answers, is why I requested that the person asking before, please send us an email. So yes, thank you for your input, Kira, but I think we need to go ahead and wrap up this webinar now, so y'all can get back to your days.
Thank you, Katie. RT and I have a running joke about how we don't necessarily have a list of FAQs specific to reporting, because almost every reporting question is in some way derivative of one of the other policy areas of the regulations. And it's, I wouldn't be like, oh, report that, unless there's a specific section. What you put in that section, I always have to defer to the other subject matter experts like you, because that's one where I can tell you what section that might go in the year, but what you specifically write in that specific case for that specific jurisdiction, I'm always going to defer to the rest of our experts. That said, I think we're ready to wrap up. Michelle, is there anything else you'd like to add as we close this out?
I just wanted to thank you, Chris, and RT, and Peter, and Katie, and Adriana, and all the participants for making this happen and giving us a really good, engaging opportunity to connect and share information and get our questions answered. And I would just say that as we move forward, just remember to use your local assistance liaison for any additional questions that you have. And this was phenomenal, so thank you all.
And my last minute addition, because I'm looking back at the Logic mailbox, there will be a little bit of some additional maintenance going on tonight. So if you're an annual report contact, you will have just gotten an email, or depending on how long this list is in the queue, you'll get an email saying it's down for maintenance from 5 to 6. So please don't use it, but hopefully that does not impact you being able to submit a report on time, because it is due August 1st, 2024. And if it is not in on that day, you will get a reminder the next day saying, hey, it's one day late. What's going on? And you'd be surprised how many people get all the way through it, forget to press submit, And then the next day, those messages go out and boom, we start getting submittals 8 a.m. Cool. Well, with that, I think we will wrap this webinar up. Thank you all for participating. And once again, specific reporting questions can be directed to the Logic mailbox or your land representative, and more policy questions around SLCP can go to the SLCP inbox, and it'll get routed to the correct subject matter expert. Thank you everyone for being here, and we'll call it a day.
Thanks again.